Welcome to the Leadership Tea podcast, brought to you by Grounded in Global Advisory, where we are grounded in leadership and global in impact. Today, Belinda and I want to talk about the difficulty that we see in having conversations. Sometimes it feels like we don't know how to talk to each other, particularly when it comes to having difficult conversations. And it's beyond giving constructive feedback to someone. It feels like with social media and all of the chat groups and the different ways that we can communicate with the advances in technology, it has degraded the quality of communication skills. I will turn it over to Belinda to get your thoughts on some tips that we can share with our audience that reflect how you and I have adapted as executives when it comes to having conversations.
I think it's really interesting that as we have our own company now and we are engaging with people who are not necessarily trained in the same styles of communication that we're trained in, we come from a space where both oral and written communication is really important and where we really value the nuance, especially when you're talking to people in other languages or other cultures and things like that. And so I think I've really had to adjust to this idea that I am now regularly engaging with people who communicate on a wide spectrum of ways. And I'm constantly adjusting and constantly having to claim my space in the communication space and becoming comfortable with ways of communicating that may be effective in certain spaces, but uncomfortable for me. And I think that's probably one of the biggest lessons I've learned over the last few years is that I really have to adjust my communication style to the place or the person with whom I'm communicating. And if I don't, that's to my detriment. I can be quiet in the wrong space and look weak. I think I'm looking diplomatic. They're perceiving me as weak. Or I can be assertive in certain spaces, and I think I'm just being really clear and direct, but it's received as, I won't say bullying, but, just being, I hate to use the word aggressive, but for lack of a better term, aggressive. Mm-hmm. When in fact, it's like you asked me for the truth and I'm just giving it to you, right? And so recently I've been reflecting a lot on some volunteer work that I'm doing that is in a space that has a lot of momentum, lots of different people with different skill sets and people who are really passionate about the work that's being done. And I have had to really work hard because people are passionate, they are direct in ways that make me really uncomfortable, that from my diplomatic ear sound rude. like really, I mean, I'm in space like, wow, you said that out loud? Like, oh, is that what we're doing? Like, oh my God, right? And that's me and the baggage I bring to the room, right? And so I've had to really drill down into two things that are helping me right now. One is really being clear about what I want to communicate. And to do that, you need to understand, right, the mission, understand what behavior you want out of people, but also understand what your boundaries are, right? So I'm now doing a better job of going into conversations with, I understand what we're trying to do. Here's what I'm capable of, right? And here's what I'm going to do. That's my negotiating strategy. And then being comfortable saying it in the least number of words, not rambling, right? I hear you. Oh, and then using a coaching technique where I repeat back what I think you've said. Mm-hmm. So what I hear you saying is X. Great. I can do Y. I heard you.
Right.
But I'm doing Y, and then being comfortable. This is the most important piece. Yeah. Being comfortable with silence, right? And I have said it. And now I'm just going to let you absorb and react. Mm-hmm. So that is something, those are two things that have been really helpful for me, is just knowing what my boundaries are and what I want to talk about. Mm-hmm. And then being comfortable with the silence as you absorb it and react, and taking a pause and just kind of, and then responding from there. But that's been enormously helpful for me.
I love the being comfortable and silence part, as you mentioned, that is definitely a coaching technique. And as an introvert, I am like naturally comfortable with silence. It doesn't bother me. I don't panic when there's empty space. I'm good with it. And I think when it comes to communication, it really does give people a chance to absorb what you've said. It gives you a chance to regroup mentally in case you need to be even more clear than you already were in making your points. I think those are all useful tips on how to improve your communication skills. And being clear, I also like what you said about having boundaries and being deliberate in your word choice and not just vomiting out everything that you could, but just being very intentional in what you say. I think all of that dovetails nicely with one of the points that I wanted to make, which is what is the what when you're having conversations? This is something that I learned, or this is something that I practiced as a senior executive at the State Department when I was managing other executives. Sometimes I would practice in the mirror. Like, what is it that I want this person to walk away with as a result of this conversation? And I do want to be clear that, how you deal with crisis communications is completely different from what we're talking about right now. We are talking about like when you have time to actually prepare and be deliberate and be intentional about the conversations that you're having. I would sometimes write out, what is it that I want to convey to this person? What do I want them to walk away with? Because the more clear I am by writing it down and practicing out aloud, this is what I'm going to say when I meet with this person. It really helped me hone in on the clarity of the message that I wanted to convey. Because I think sometimes we don't take enough time to pause and think about, okay, I need to have a difficult conversation. Let me prepare. Let me not just go off the handle and say the first thing that comes to mind. Like, I'm annoyed with this person. They pissed me off. They did this. They screwed something up. Okay, that might all be true, but am I doing them a disservice by just, saying the first things that come to mind? Or will the outcome that I'm seeking be better because I've actually taken the time to sit down and write out, this is the what. This is what I want to say. This is what I want them to walk away with.
Mm-hmm. I really agree with that. I think that being really clear about what your goals are in the conversation, but that idea of practicing, I mean, you practice in front of a mirror. For me, I play it over and over again in my head, but I think through all the different scenarios, and I'm rarely surprised then in the real conversation. It's like, oh, so we've decided to go that direction. Okay, I'm ready. So I think that is, I definitely agree with you on both of those points.
The second part of how I think about communicating is the why. Why am I having this conversation? Why is it important for me to say these things to this individual? And sometimes I think because we have a tendency to not really step back and think about the why, that can be the reason why conversations get derailed. Like, if I'm giving this person feedback because they messed something up, that's a clear reason why. If they have been performing in a way that has been bothering me for months, and I've now suddenly decided that this is the moment when I need to tell this person that they've been underperforming, then I owe it to them to explain why haven't I brought it to their attention up until now? And that's on me. But I think, again, when it comes to having effective conversations, it's important that you're clear in why have you decided to have this conversation with this person right now? Is it because you have a major project coming up? Is it because you see a pattern of behavior that is detrimental, to the team, to the company? What's the why?
I agree with you. As I think about it in the context of, say, like this volunteer organization, where there are times when you are the boss. And so, yes, you're providing context and that's helpful. And I think the person wants that. There are times where you're engaging with people. This is what I mean about these different communication styles. This person was under stress. They're really busy. They're freaking out about all the things the organization's got to do. And so I had to keep the why as brief as possible, right? You want me to do X, I can do X.5. Like, this is all I can do. X and a little bit of Y. Here's a little bit of just a glimpse as to why I'm putting up that boundary. Right. And that's what that person could absorb. So I think an important component of good communication is, yes, you have your kind of framework in place, but you have to be able to read the room. You have to be able to adjust to the moment and the person.
Yes. Your point on reading the room and adjusting to the moment and the person is actually a good segue to my final point, which is the how. How is this person going to receive what I'm saying? How am I going to deal with their reaction to what it is that I'm saying? The conversation can go well, but it could also go sideways. Like, what happens if the person has a strong reaction or decides to shout or is not receptive to what you're saying? I do think that there comes a point where you have to have these calculations in your mind before you have a conversation, because again, it goes back to the what and the why. Like, what is the behavior change that you're seeking, or what is the outcome of this conversation that you want? And I think sometimes people decide not to have difficult conversations because they are too consumed with how the person is going to react. You know, we all want people, most of us want people to like us. Most of us want to avoid confrontation, you know, to the extent that we can. And we don't want to ruffle feathers. We don't want people to be upset or angry. And so we shy away from having difficult conversations because we get caught up in our own fear of how is this person going to react. But then that goes back to your point, Belinda, in terms of figuring out when is the time to have these conversations. Maybe you don't have it in the heat of the moment. Maybe you know that someone is going through something and they're not in a position to receive what you're saying anyway. And so maybe you wait a few days or a week or whatever. You use your good judgment. This comes, you know, again, back to our point on having good judgment and discernment, you know, something that we've discussed in other episodes. It's on you as the executive to, you know, have the professional maturity to know, is this person in any headspace to receive what it is that I'm saying? And maybe they never will. That's a different challenge. That's a different problem. But that should not prevent you from having that difficult conversation. How they react should not keep you from delivering your message and having a difficult conversation. We are proud to be sponsored by State Department Federal Credit Union, a financial institution built around the realities of global service and frequent relocation. From competitive lending and rewards credit cards to international money management through WISE, SDFCU provides reliable financial access wherever members are posted. Learn more about their global banking solutions at sdfcu.org. State Department Federal Credit Union is federally insured by the National Credit Union Administration and is an equal housing lender. Membership and product eligibility is subject to approval.
I would just emphasize that really two elements of that, which would include, I think it's important to optimize the timing of the conversation for not only when, as you're reading the room, when it's best for the room, but also when it's best for you, when you are at your best.
Yes.
One mistake I made in the conversation I had yesterday with this volunteer group is I timed that conversation too late in my day. My day starts really early. And so I start getting tired by like late afternoon. And so this conversation happened late afternoon. And yes, the thing was about boundaries, but I think it really was a little more, I was tired, right? It was late in the day. So I'm like, hey, look, I got 99 problems and y'all can't be one of them. It's late. I got like 10 more things to do. Like, blah, blah, blah. But if we'd had that conversation at like, say, 9 in the morning,
when you were fresh,
we could have given it a different energy.
Yeah.
Right. And so I thought like that was a strategic error on my part. And I'm usually better about that, but that was something that I would highlight for our audience. And then, the other piece is really, as you're thinking through that conversation and that context and thinking about the person's reaction, you have to be honestly, and we talk a lot about bravery on the show, but like, you have to be brave.
Yes.
Because not being afraid of a reaction and therefore not having the conversation, I feel like your silence is like a lie, right? Silence is a lie, and that lie is going to start to snowball. It is better when it's very small to take that hit than to wait until it's a big thing. And like you said, some personalities are just, doesn't matter if it's a little thing or if you wait for the big thing, the person's going to be crazy. So do it over here when it's small.
Yes.
But yeah, you cannot allow the lie of silence to grow.
You cannot allow the lie of silence to grow. I love that. And I also love what you said about checking in with yourself and knowing when are you at peak performance to have these hard conversations. Because if you're spent, if you're mentally drained, that's probably not the best time to have that hard conversation, because you're more likely to pop off if the person doesn't respond in the way that you want them to. So like know yourself before, you go into having hard conversations. And I would also say, Belinda, just as like a general practice, one of the things that I've told other executives that I coach is that if you're not having at least one hard conversation a week, at a minimum, if you're not having one hard conversation a week, you're missing something.
What are you doing?
You are not doing your job, because I guarantee you, even if you're working in the best office environment, everyone's great, everyone gets along, people are rowing in the same direction, human nature dictates that something's going to be off. Like someone's having an off day, someone's missing the mark. Like and it doesn't have to be intentional, but life happens, mistakes happen. And I guarantee you that even in the top performing, best places to work, in the world, whether it's corporate, government, whatever, something is going to go wrong. And as a leader and as an executive, if you don't have your finger on the pulse, if you're not having, again, at least one hard conversation a week, I guarantee you're missing something.
I feel like there's a certain level that only the bad things are coming to you.
Right.
There's a certain point where you have to make the switch from being a good employee to being a brave leader.
Yes.
Right? Because if you're in a large enough organization, I feel like the last decade of my least, maybe 10 to 15 years has been like this. There's layers of managers beneath you. And so if those managers couldn't solve it, then by the time it gets to you, it's just bad.
Right.
I feel like for many years, I've been joking about how only the worst things hit my desk. And so I agree with you. Like, if you're running from that, then you're fundamentally running from your job.
Right.
Like, you're getting paid as an executive to do hard things, to think big thoughts,
to have hard conversations.
I mean, 100%. So I used to have this picture on my door, like jokingly in one of my assignments of from The Wiz of, I can't think of the character's name, but the woman who sings like, Don't Nobody Bring Me No Bad News. Right. And I was just like, it dawned on me, and I had it on the inside of the door where I saw it because it dawned on me one day, like, oh, I'm in the job where everybody just brings you bad news.
Yes.
Right. And from the outside, anyone else would have looked at that team and said, like, they're super high performing. Everything's perfect. Like, they are amazing. And they were. It was an awesome team. But but we still had to deal with bad news stuff.
Of course.
And so I feel like that's just, and yeah, I had to have hard conversations and I had to do, make hard decisions. And that's just, it's just a part of it.
That's just a part of the job. The one thing that I would say to close out this conversation, before we started recording, we were talking about the proliferation of chat groups. We're both in too many chat groups. All of us are in too many chat groups, too many platforms, too many. Yeah, it's too much from a cybersecurity perspective, from, the perspective of just keeping track of who you're saying what to. It's too much. And I would just say, because we talk about building community so much on this show, and this theme of communication and having good communication skills and really connecting with people, you cannot build community in a chat group. Like, chat groups have their purpose, especially, I think one of the biggest lessons or biggest best practices that we gained from COVID was pivoting to a world in which we had to find different ways to communicate. But I feel like that it's gone overboard, right? Like, we've lost the ability to connect with one another in person, to have genuine conversations. People get on these chat groups and they feel that they can say things that I don't think that they would say face to face in a one-on-one. And I do want to be clear that I'm not saying all chat groups are bad. That's not what I'm saying at all. Hybrid communications have their place and are very valuable. But I feel as though they've also taught us that we need to be even more intentional and more careful in how we say what we say to one another, so that things don't get lost in translation because you're texting on your phone.
So I agree with you. I think that a hybrid approach makes sense, and that there are, many different scenarios where people need, different kinds of things. But I think about, say, when I was in Rwanda and during the pandemic, and I was in a lot of chat groups, and I might chat with you, send some funny memes. But then there comes that moment where I'm still in an empty room by myself with my phone. Like, yes, we kikied a little bit, but I'm still alone. Right. And so I understand what it means, and you do too, to be geographically, away from people that you're close to, and struggling to build community, or maybe being in places where it's really hard to build in-person community, or, having an illness or some physical impediment that makes that challenging. But I also recognize, whenever possible, the power of having some human communication, some human direct communication. And it's something that we joke about at our house a lot. How, for me, like, my family notices my mood is better. I'm super extroverted. So I'm better when I go outside and I have some contact with people. I understand that people are introverted, but there is a difference between, like, you and I trying to build a relationship of trust virtually, since we can meet, we are near each other. To have that human connection really helps.
1,000%.
I also just feel like right now, the other extreme is happening in my world, where there's just a lot of work that's happening by chat groups. And I'm like, kind of on the other side of, how people complain about meetings should have been an email.
Yeah.
Sometimes I'm in chats and I'm like, yo, this should be an email.
This could be an email. Yes.
This should be a document. Like,
right.
What are we doing right now? This should be a spreadsheet. Like, You're tripping.
Right.
So I think that we're, like, becoming overly reliant on this, using them as knowledge centers. Like, oh, I put that in the chat, go search it. Like, whoa, it feels unsafe.
Yes.
And unstable. And I'm not sure who owns this information and stuff. Like, just less in the chat.
Less in the chat. And how are we keeping track of, like, all of these documents? Like you're saying, people are waxing poetic in chat groups, and it's like, okay, this probably needs to be a document and memorialized somewhere so that we can go back and refer to it. Yeah.
That needs to be an email, right? It's like a bumper sticker, all of it. Your meeting, your Slack, your chat,
Yes.
it all should have been an email.
It all should have been an email. Yes. I think what we're saying more than anything is, don't be afraid of having difficult conversations. Make sure you're clear. Make sure you're making the necessary adjustments. Make sure that you're not letting fear get in the way of having that difficult conversation. Make sure you're in check when you're having these conversations and that you're at your best so that you can get the best outcome.
And then build your community toolkit with lots of tools. There's some chats, there's some emails, there's some coffees, there's some video calls. Like,
right.
You've got a lot of different tools. Don't become overly reliant on one or two.
There it is.
With that. Well, look, Shelby, I would say for our listeners who are listening on audio, you're missing out on like all the good fun, the laughs, the great backgrounds, the wonderful camera effects. Like, you're missing out on so much. Come over to YouTube and please subscribe to our channel. If nothing else, just subscribe to our channel and definitely please like and engage with some of our content. And we look forward to having a few upcoming episodes for you that I think are going to be really interesting. So stay tuned for those. And please come back and sip wisdom and stir success with us in the future.